Good day, everyone. Welcome to Black Logic. Trump's sweeping new tariffs slam allies and rivals alike, igniting fears of a global trade war and prices hike. Kremlin confirms Trump and Putin will meet to discuss Ukraine, raising alarms over U.S. foreign policy direction. Leaked plans show how Israel is preparing a phased military occupation of Gaza City, with mass displacement expected. Texas Republicans push a redistrict plan to lock in 5 new House seats, prompting nationwide political backlash. And I'm going to give you guys a breakdown on how important these seats are and how this could potentially affect the entire nation. So Donald Trump's sweeping reciprocal tariffs that is ranging from 10% to as high as 50% have taken effect as of today and targeting nearly 70 countries, including Brazil, Switzerland, Canada, India, and the UE, and a couple more. And the hikes aim to bring in billions of dollars and reshape trade with added duties on pharmaceuticals and semiconductor chips. The economists, when it comes to economics, warn of higher consumer prices, global backlash, and possible court challenges. So again, the only question that I think that Americans have in these regards, is this going to increase the products and services in America? And believe me, ladies and gentlemen, when I tell you this, that almost 8 out of 10 economists stating that it will, because eventually these other countries, these imports and exports that we receive from other countries, they will start to raise the prices to cover their businessmen and the productions of those products. So again, we all have to see how this kind of transform and reflects in our own economy, but chances are things will rise. It could be significant. So I don't want to raise the alarm too soon, because could there be some leveling off of inflation in America behind these tariffs, which then will decrease the amount of interest rates, and the Feds may lower the rates even more so than what they have? But I mean, we're still roughly around 6.2, 6.5, almost 7%. We were at one point in time 9%, so it has come down a little bit. But nonetheless, Americans are really looking around that 4 to 5% range when it comes to mortgage rates, car interest loan rates, and et cetera. So again, we'll see how that transforms within the government. Now, in a stunning turn, the Kremlin confirmed that Trump and Putin are set to meet in the coming days, the first such summit since 2021. Reportedly, that the UAE could host Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, called previous talk constructive. But critics warn that the move may sideline Ukraine and legitimize Russia aggression. And as we continue to look at this, and even though President Zelensky came to the White House and showed his entire tale to the United States of America, he did have a point. He stated during that time that President Putin could not be trusted. And rightfully so, weeks or maybe even a month afterwards, President Putin did not adhere to the words he spoke to President Trump. And this is not the first time that these two have met. So this is really nothing new. So when I look at international relations when it comes to Russia, it has always been sketchy, because some people are labeling Putin as a mastermind. That's what a lot of people are labeling him, because he continues to trick our American presidents each and every year. Now, some people don't want to even deal with President Putin, but because he has such a large country with Eastern European ties of influence when it comes to countries like Turkey, India, Pakistan, China, he's connected with these countries due to the massive amount of resources that Russia has. Russia has, millions and barrels of oil that these countries need, and as well as natural gas. So how could America on this worldwide stage avoid Russia? Russia is a major player in economics, is a major player when it comes to resources, is a major player when it comes to the spy game. And look here, folks, we are in bed with Russia. We are in bed with China, whether we like it or not. Not in the ways traditionally with trade in those regards. But at one point in time, we were definitely in bed. I want you guys to kind of just gloss over the Cold War. And the reason why they Cold War, because there was no troops on the ground, but it was a lot of spying, espionage, a lot of counterintelligence. A lot of those things were going on during the Cold War. And it was a space race simultaneously that were going on. And we were stealing secrets from them, and they were stealing secrets from us. And they had double and triple agents. So again, a lot of the ties that we have for Russia still remains. Again, there was a lot of Russian oligarchs living in America, living in Florida, living in California. So again, we have to deal with Russia, but as it pertains to Ukraine, should Ukraine have a seat at the table in negotiating the ceasefire and or peace treaty of these countries? Yes, but I must point out a very critical point in history. At one point in time, Ukraine was a part of Russia. Russia was a part of Ukraine. It was called the Soviet Union. And who was the founding fathers? Who constructed the Soviet Union? It was officials out of the country of Ukraine. So again, I've kind of broken that down in another video. You guys can go check that out on my channel. But nonetheless, I think in order for we pick a side and we trying to crown Trump as King Peace, that is going to be very difficult because we cannot trust Putin. And again, President Zelensky did point these things out, and Putin has flip-flop, twists and turns. But again, I believe there's a stronger play here because of the historic landmass that Russia has as it pertains to Ukraine, and the landmass that Ukraine has and how that was partitioned and divided. That could be an original part of Russia. So as this story unfolds, I'll keep you guys informed as well. Thank you guys for joining me here on Black Logic. Please hit that subscribe button as well as the notification bell so you are notified every time I go live or release a video. These are some hot topics for you guys, because in Israel, of course, they are expected to approve a phased military takeover of the Gaza Strip spanning 4 to 5 months, centered on Gaza City. The plan envisions displacing up to 1 million Palestinians, fueling humanitarian alarm and risking the safety of hostages. Internal military dissent persists within Netanyahu's own cabinet. So what does Israel plan to gain by occupying Gaza for only 4 to 5 months? Well, let me speculate just a little here. I believe they're going to do hostage finding missions. They're going to really try to find these hostages. They're going to be going through tunnels and waterways. They're going to be looking in every structure that, any structure that is still upstanding. Because as I told you yesterday, and I said 90% of Gaza is demolished. I'm going to go a little bit deeper. I think it's roughly 95%. And the other 5% of those structures are not safe to live in and or stand in, because they're crumbling structures that have been bombarded by an onslaught of drones as well as bombs being dropped by jets. So again, we're going to see how this 4 to 5 months is going to be extended another 4 to 5 months to a year to 2 years if we allow this to take place. When I mean by we, I mean the United States of America and their allies. Because again, President Trump has not been on board as recognizing Palestine as a statehood, even though there's people with history and heritage and lineage of being Palestinian. If France and the UK are recognizing Palestine as a statehood, what are their benefits from this? What are the resources they plan to garner in order to back Palestinian statehood? Now, granted, if you're going to back Palestinian statehood, what does that mean? You're just going to recognize it like, oh, okay, we recognize you guys as a country. We recognize you guys as a region. Okay, how are you going to support them? How are you going to uphold international laws? Are you going to have them to have a seat at the table at the UN so they can at least have United Nations soldiers on ground that can prevent the occupying of the Israeli IDF? So again, just by you simply recognizing a place as a place and their people doesn't really mean you're going to support them unless you put them in position and you use your influence to have United Nations and other allied countries to go and support them against this onslaught and bombardment of the IDF. Now, granted, as a disclaimer, I understand why the initial attack of Gaza happened, because that is a stronghold. That is the location where Hamas headquarters is. And you guys were trying to eradicate the state of Hamas terrorist group. Okay. But now that Hamas is roughly down, I believe the numbers was roughly down to 15 to 10,000 fighters, and they're hiding in between the innocent people of that region. The only thing now, there's only two ways to go about this, ladies and gentlemen. In my opinion, is that you put troops on the ground, you put secret agents on the ground and find these people one by one, two by two, or you continue to do the onslaught and bombardment and bombing of this region where majority of the people are innocent. There's roughly 1 million people in Gaza, and only 10,000 of them supposedly are part of Hamas. So again, how many people have to perish in order for the strategy to change? Because again, will you eventually eliminate 10,000 Hamas fighters that's supposedly in this region still? Yes, but by doing so, you will have to eliminate every single Palestinian. So again, my question would be, how long is America, how long is the world going to allow this to happen? And again, most importantly, which I know I have been asking these questions for quite some time. Where are the Middle Eastern countries in support of this? They've been very, very, very quiet. Now, granted, when I mean by quiet, I'm pretty sure they put stuff on their own social media, or they put things in their own, news nation networks. But you have heard really nothing on the world stage when it comes to these very large, powerful, rich Middle Eastern countries backing Palestine. What are we missing here on the world stage? Why is this important to America? Because we keep supporting Israel. Yeah, Israel is one of our allies, and Israel holds a very strategic location when it comes to intel of the Middle East. There's, I think our really true ally in the region. But again, that doesn't mean we have to condone their actions. That doesn't mean that we have to support their actions. And it really doesn't mean that we have to resource their actions. So again, we're going to see how this plays out, this so-called 4 to 5 months of occupation and the mission therein, because believe me, I think it's going to be a lot longer than 4 to 5 months. Now, Texas Republicans have unveiled a new congressional map aimed at securing 5 additional GOP seats in 2026 House elections, prompting Democrats to flee the state and protest and spark threats of nationwide redistrict retaliation. States from California to New York are considering their own counter plans, because as you look at this story right here on your screen, folks, you're going to see that this plan started in Texas, but this is going to grow to California, flipping, having Texas to be 100% red, having California to either be split or turn red, Indiana, New York. Okay, they have a lot of states here, Missouri, and some of these, Florida, some of these states from time to time have flipped blue. Some of them have flipped red. But a lot of these states, they trying to consistently have them to stay red. Now, a lot of times people may think that Florida have always been, no, Florida have been blue on some occasion, depending on the candidate. But if you upseat Democratic seats, then you replace them with Republican seats, then they will always have the majority. Because as we look at the map and you look at the amount of votes that each state has, is based upon population. And then that's why they redistrict these things in order to garner more votes so they can have their politicians in place so they can always have the majority. This is why the Democrats are fleeing Texas, to prevent this quorum. And I guess people may, ask the question, is this legal? Because if you're not watching Texas right now, you're not paying attention to the future of America. Because what's happening in Texas isn't just the redistrict, it's red domination. Because Texas Republicans have pushed forward with a strategic redrawing of district maps that could unseat 5 Democratic held seats in the state legislature. But don't get it twisted, because this isn't just about local politics. It's a testing ground, it's a blueprint and a political war room experiment. We are here for it, folks. This is why they're leaving the state of Texas, because of this redistrict plan. And they're trying to figure out how to stop it. Now, some may argue that the Democrats have majority of the country blue. And now it's time for the GOP to have the same influence, to have the same expansion when it comes through our nation. I know a lot of people may have, what if this works? You better believe that California, New York, Illinois, Indiana, and every battleground state with a GOP foothold is next. They're just going to line these states up as I showed you. You had Florida, Missouri, Indiana, California, New York on the list. This is about creating a political power vacuum and then filling it with red ink, red seats, and then red votes. So how does this work? Every 10 years following the census, states redraw their legislative maps. And they always show this on CNN, NBC, ABC, Fox. They always show how the country is divided between red and blue. Ideally, that reflects population shifts, but in the hands of political operatives, this becomes a legal weapon when it comes to politics. Because in Texas, the new GOP red district plan could, again, unseat 5 Democratic incumbents, consolidate Republican-heavy rural zones, and fragment urban Black and Latino communities that lean blue. They don't need to win hearts. They just need to move lines. This is why they do what they do, because areas that mostly probably voted Black and Latino, even some white, have always voted blue for their districts, have always voted blue in their counties. But when you redistrict and you redraw these lines, they don't have to win the hearts and minds of the people. See, as I told you guys before, you guys are looking at this as we are living in a democracy. We're living in a republic with representatives. And when representatives just draw a couple of lines and move a couple of seats and put people in place, then the people, you have to vote for a Republican. That's going to be your choice, a Republican or Republican. And believe me when I tell you this, it's all legal under the guise of redistricting. The Supreme Court has already ruled that the partisan gerrymandering is not unconstitutional. This is the Supreme Court stating, folks, that is not unconstitutional. And that means redrawing maps to help their party, whoever party, Democrats or Republicans, that is perfectly fine as long it is not racially discriminatory, which they know how to disguise. It can be racially discriminatory even against, white, Black, Hispanic, and Asians, because not all Black people vote democratically. Not all white people vote for the Republic or for the Republicans, as well as Asians and Hispanics and all others. This is not all inclusive of how one demographic of people vote for another, but this is the majority. Now, historically, and unfortunately, majority of Black Americans have voted democratically. And again, that stems back from Lyndon B. Johnson signing inside the Civil Rights Act and Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King, supporting the Democratic Party because of the civil rights legislation. Now, if we come back in history and we look at a lot of the achievements that Black Americans have made socially and economically, and when it comes to our civil rights, those privileges and rights, and again, I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, I'm not an independent, I'm just giving you the truth, have been passed, have been supported, okay, this is prior civil rights, by the Republican Party. I think sometimes we just forget that the Dixiecrats, the party of the KKK, and again, I could break down and give you a whole rundown of what the Republicans have done historically and what the Democrats have done historically. And even to this day, the Democrats just get Black faces and white places to have you to go ahead and vote, and we continue to receive nothing. We really need to wake up. And I'm not telling anyone to vote for the Republican Party, and I'm not telling anyone to vote for the Democratic Party. I'm just telling you to vote on your morals, value, ethics, and what you want out of this country and what you need out of this country. Just because someone sounds good, just because someone speaks to your feelings, this is about Black and white. Because I told you, this country is not moral. This country is not ethical. This country is ran by laws and policies and regulations. Every law that's on the book is not ethical. Every law that's on the book is not moral. It's black and white. And even with black and white, believe me, there's 1,000 times more 50 shades than gray when it comes to politics in America. And the question I know some of you have is how the GOP could use this nationally. How could this comb out through all these different places? As I was showing you guys here, let me just go run through these states that the GOP plans on redistricting and redrawing lines. Again, we already been talking about Texas. California is a huge one. That's a huge one, okay? Indiana, New York, Missouri, Florida. I think that was the last one. Yeah. So again, we have all of these states. Okay. We have all of these states that they plan on just changing the dynamics of that state on. And a lot of you may say, good, California does need to turn red. Maybe it'd be cleaned up. Maybe they wouldn't have so much homelessness. But I wonder if I were to think about the strategy that the GOP would essentially take, how would they go about doing this? Well, first, they're already testing the model in Texas. Unseat the Democrats, survive legal challenges, and normalize the tactic. This is very simple, in my opinion. And then if they export the models to states like Indiana, Florida, Wisconsin, Georgia, where Republicans hold the legislature over the governorship, they can fragment Democratic districts, especially in urban, Black, Latino, Asian, immigrant heavy zones, low impoverished white people that are aware of their circumstances, so they vote Democrat. Keep blue voters split across multiple districts so they never reach a majority. Protect Republican incumbents by building safe districts that make them untouchable, even in swing states. Flip swing states red, not through elections, but through map manipulation. Now, imagine this playing out in every state where red controls the pen. What do you get? When we talk about local legislation, local legislators, Republican majority, state houses, Republican dominance, U.S. House of Representatives, you'll now have a red wave, which historically has been the blue wave. Senate seats, they'll be locked in through engineered voting power. And of course, the presidency within striking range because the electoral college math begins to shift in the GOP favor. This isn't just about redistricting. It's not. This is electoral engineering that is going to play out over a very long time that the GOP will continue to win. And again, I'm not giving you this as I'm for or against, because when I look to vote, as I comb through candidates, not their personal account, what are the policies that they plan to in place? What are the policies they plan to pass when they're in office? But nonetheless, let's just say that this strategy succeeds, that the GOP are going about this. What happens when one party has a chokehold on every level of government? As we look at the judiciary branch, Republican governors can appoint conservative judges at the state level. State education boards, red ideologies dominate school curriculums. Yeah, this is going to go all through the infrastructure of every facet of America. We're talking about not only a red wave, but a red tsunami, because they would change, the justice system. They would change the education boards. What about voting laws? Republican-led legislators passed voter ID laws that, essentially roll back early voting and purge some roles. And again, I am for voter ID. Yes, you should have you should have a legitimate ID when voting. Yes, we should be able to identify you're voting for these very influential and powerful positions in America, whether it be the president, the Senate, the Congress, your local alderman, your councilman, your governor. Yeah, you should have voter ID. In regards to Congress, with gerrymandered maps, GOP seats become untouchable. No amount of campaigning can flip them back. As it pertains to the Senate, even with fewer people, red states start outweighing blue influence because of how state representation works. And the presidency, again, electoral college, math starts tilting red, not because more people vote Republican, but because the map have been rigged to favor them. That is what we're referring to. Now, compound that over decades. What do you get? You get a Democratic Party box out. And the only thing they can do is shout from the sidelines while the GOP runs up the score. You'll get a generation of people and voters who will be neutralized. Now, as it pertains to demographics, ethnics, and race, and as I say, even though more Black Americans are voting Republican, they're coming back to their wits in some regards, not saying that I support that or that I don't support that. But as it pertains today, you'll get a generation of, Black, Latino, young, and immigrant voters neutralized, not by force, but by finesse. This is a finesse job. This is a slow motion political erasure, not with voter suppression tactics we've seen before with a pen and a district map. And the question still remains, why does this matter in 2026, 2028, and beyond? Because again, this is not about 2025. The midterms in 2026, if the GOP flips key states red, Democrats could lose dozens of local and federal seats, many permanently. And as we look at the 2028 presidential race, if electoral college lines shift due to red state growth and redistrict dominance, a GOP candidate could win without winning the popular vote. Again, we look at the 2030 census. Republicans could control how future data is interpreted and how maps are redrawn, locking in power until 2040. Again, this is a red tsunami because, again, they can change how things have always been done to favor the strategy they have in place of remapping and drawing and redistricting these lines. They can interpret how data is viewed and how then they can continue to redistrict and eventually turn the majority of the country red. Now, here's the wildest part. They don't need a majority of Americans to support them. They just need enough map control to silence the majority. Where is the democracy that I keep hearing people state? I keep hearing saying we the people and the founding father and the Constitution. Sounds great, folks, but when you start to do your research and actually read these things, there isn't enough map control to silence the majority because they will be in place. Again, we live in a republic, not a democracy, and this is about representation. So now they're figuring out how to represent people from the GOP, Republican Party, just as well as the Democrats, of people who never wanted to be represented by that political party. So after stating all of that, one question remains. What can be done? What can happen to slow this down, stop this? I can think of a couple things. Federal voting rights legislation, something like the Johns Lewis Act could outlaw extreme gerrymandering, but that's stuck in Congress. It has not been passed. Independent redistrict commissions in states like Michigan, California prove there is another way, but those only exist because citizens fought hard to build them. Will they continue to fight hard to sustain them? Mass voter education and turnout still matters, but in a rigged system, the margins continue to shrink regardless. And this is why I believe how we may teach our children, our teenagers, our young adults about finance, the economy. We should also teach them about politics. It doesn't have to go as in depth, but give them the very basics. Not stating, oh, we vote Democrat in this house. Man, we vote Republican. We are conservative in this house. Nothing on those terms. Have them to read legislation, laws that are proposed to being passed, and have them to decipher their decisions based on their lives. So I guess I'm questioning, will the Democrats fight the maps or just fight each other as they always have been doing? And this is the reason why the Democrats lost, because they have a lot of infighting. They don't know who's going to be their leader going forward. They're talking about Jasmine Crockett. They're talking about Beto O'Rourke. They're talking about Kamala Harris may come back inside the picture, even though she dropped out and trying to be a governor somewhere. They have no clear directions. Because let me tell you this, if the Democrats lose these maps that I've been referencing, they will lose the game. And when it comes to politics, ladies and gentlemen, the only game that's being played are the ones that we're in, because again, they're the game makers.